You're only in trouble if you get caught.
How you get so big getting hold of this kind?
Hello and welcome into this week's spoiler review for Star Wars The Clone Wars. We are now over halfway through the Ahsoka arc in this final season. I'm going to be discussing spoilers for A Dangerous Debt, the seventh episode in this new season. I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed this arc. I've also really enjoyed Bad Batch. Most of the online discourse I'm seeing, people are either like really liking Bad Batch and then this episode arc feels boring to them, or they really like this one and Bad Batch wasn't what they were about. I like all of it, and that's not in a I want to be positive and like all of the things. Like, this is just what Clone Wars is to me. Clone Wars is an anthology show. It's we're gonna spend a little bit here, we're gonna spend a little bit there, we're gonna have the high octane episodes, and we're gonna have the slow, like contemplative kind of episodes. And so this has been really, I don't know that it's been what I've wanted or not wanted, it's just what I've expected, right? Like, Clone Wars was, like, these were never going to be episodes that they wrote to finish off the series. They were going to be episodes they selected that were already written to finish off the series, so this is kind of what I was expecting. I really like that we started off with some really high octane episodes, and I really like that now that we're in the middle, we're taking some time to get to know Ahsoka in this medium, in the show that we got to meet her in, and then it's just gonna be a giant wall of emotion when we get to the final 4 episodes of the series. I have to go through this again. But this episode was one of those really weird instances where a ton happens and absolutely not a lot happens at the same time. It's something that I think a medium like television is absolutely perfect for. This episode was all about getting to know more of Ahsoka and the Martez sisters, but it was also telling something that people have really been wanting to see from Star Wars material for a long time, which is weighing the choices the Jedi have to make. The scene where the Martez sisters are talking about what happened to their parents reminded me a lot about the scene at the beginning of Captain America Civil War, where Tony meets the mother of somebody who died as the Avengers were saving the planet, as it were. And so you have this dichotomy of something really heroic and something that had to happen, but that there was collateral because of the decisions that the heroes made. And it doesn't make them not heroes, but it does mean that bad things can happen even when people have the best of intentions. This is where we find Ahsoka at the beginning of this episode. She and the Martez sisters are locked up, and Ahsoka gets in yet another morality battle with Rafa, and it's been really interesting to watch Ahsoka go through this. It feels like Ahsoka anyway to stick up for what's right, say what she believes in, but it feels a little bit odd that she would be following this family and just, like, going off about how they live their life, especially when she has some pretty interesting, ethically questionable friends that we've seen throughout the Clone Wars. I feel like, and this is all interpretation, I have no evidence for this, but I feel like a lot of what's going on is Ahsoka has just left the Jedi, and at least narratively, we haven't seen her since she's left the Jedi, and she's wrestling with that, and I think she's trying to figure out who she is when she's not a Jedi. And I think she's trying to figure out how much is she responsible for how other people behave when she's not a Jedi, and how much is she responsible for telling people how they should be. I mean, if she's with other Jedi, then other Jedi within this community who have this code call each other out if they're not acting like Jedi, or at least they should. It's debatable whether or not the prequel era Jedi did that. In theory, that's what you're supposed to do. So now Ahsoka is with this new group of people, and I think this is us seeing her adjust to that kind of life and what's going on. But she gets a really rude awakening as they tell a story. This part was insane and amazing to me on a couple of different levels. The one that I already talked about, and what I'll get into more, which is the idea of Jedi and having consequences for their actions, but it was also just a really neat callback to something that we had seen in the Clone Wars. I mean, it was describing Zero's escape from the Senate, which is something we saw at the end of season 1, I think. So now here in this final season, we're getting a callback to something we'd seen so long before. And especially just hearing something about Zero, who's been around since the movie, which launched the series release order-wise. You know, it was a really cool callback, and I liked, not only does Ahsoka have to realize that something bad happened because of the Jedi, she has to realize that something bad happened because of her Jedi. You know, Anakin was involved in what happened. This isn't just some other story where she can dismiss it. This is something she has a personal connection to in what she's dealing with. And for her to have maybe thought about this instance, this moment, for years as if this was this great moment, this time the Jedi did a great thing, and find out that it completely screwed up the lives of this family and how she has to rectify that. And like the idea of how many other families have they wrecked saving the galaxy, and she has no idea. Not only for Ahsoka to get that lesson was so needed in Star Wars, especially prequel trilogy stuff, but then to have it have that kind of personal connection both for Clone Wars viewers and for her, I thought it was really brilliant. To the point itself, we hear the Jedi that Rafa talked to is presumably Luminara Unduli. She was listed on the Wikipedia article as being confirmed for that, and maybe we knew that because I don't know. I know the Martez sisters were added in when these episodes got redone. You know, that backstory might have existed for the original character who was there prior to these two women. Again, it's presumably Luminara. I don't know how hyper confirmed that is, but it was certainly the physical description of her. And that was another interesting connection because, one, I think Luminara is the epitome of really one of the most defining characters for what's wrong with the Jedi in the prequel trilogy. And I like Luminara as a character, and I don't think she's a bad person, but she is that person that is so into being a Jedi and seems so unsympathetic to anybody who struggles with it. I kind of think Luminara and Mace Windu are the two characters that most represent where the Jedi have gone wrong, while still being decent people. And I think it's interesting that it's Luminara in this case who has affected the lives of the Martez sisters. It's also Luminara who trained Barasafi, Ahsoka's former best friend, who then framed her and is the catalyst for the events that led to Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order. So it's kind of weird that Barriss seems to just be involved with all of these things that have sort of inadvertently affected Ahsoka's life. But I thought that was an interesting connection too. But, you know, Luminara is 100% that Jedi who would be like, well, you know, the Force. You know, she wouldn't know how to be empathetic because that's just not who she is as a character. And then to just see that this family suffered and presumably nothing was done. So I think this is an important thing for Ahsoka to kind of find now, because Ahsoka is wrestling with who is she as not a Jedi, and who are the Jedi and how does she feel about them. And to feel like here's another family that was negatively impacted by the Jedi is probably a rough thing for her to hear right now, and yet also probably something she knows too well, and something that scares her because she knows it a little too well. Now, at this point, the Pikes come in, they take Rafa away because they want to interrogate her. Trace and Ahsoka have another moment to talk, and Trace says that she helped Ahsoka because it's what her mother would have done, and how Trace knows that the way they've been living is not the way they were raised, that it's this response to, you know, what happened because they're on their own. And I liked this because it shows Trace is a good-hearted person. I don't think Rafa is necessarily a bad person either. I think Rafa has just been through a lot and is reacting the way she knows how to react. But Trace especially has a good heart, and kind of knows better, but also doesn't know what else to do. And I thought that was a really good character moment for Trace as well. I think that the Martez sisters are, as a stand-in, like, if you like them and you like them as characters, that's great. I'm right there with you. But, like, maybe if you're struggling to understand what they're doing and, like, why we're spending time with them and why we're spending time with these episodes, besides that it's just important for Ahsoka, I think they can really represent the people of the Republic. People who feel left behind and abandoned by the Jedi, and the Jedi is an extension of the Republic, and good-hearted people who've kind of had to go into doing some bad things to kind of keep themselves going, and just a representation of how the Jedi have failed the galaxy and how the Republic have failed the galaxy. And so even if maybe you don't care about these two specific characters all that much, I think they are very representative to what's going on at the time, and looking at them as a metaphor for a bigger picture, I think can kind of help make a little bit more sense about why we're spending time here. Rafa gets returned and they take Trace away, but Trace is really, really crafty. She kind of fakes fainting and then uses that as a distraction to get out, and she's running and she's busting other people out of cells, and so she can get away, and she's kind of taking care of herself. This is kind of my own thing that I found interesting, and this may very well get addressed in the next episode, and if it does, that's fine. I just think that in an episode that was being so morally complex about the actions of a Jedi, you would literally go from a scene of like that, examining that, to a scene of a kid shooting and killing a bunch of people. And like Clone Wars always has a bunch of shooting and killing, but like Trace did not seem phased by the sheer number of gangsters that she was killing at all throughout this episode. Especially when you have the bits where like they literally crush a guy in the elevator, and then later like Trace is trying to shoot at people and Ahsoka uses the Force to pull the guy out, so like Trace can basically shoot an unprepared guy. I thought that was odd. Like I thought that was, if I have any complaint about the episode, it was just like how flippantly they were treating that. And typically I wouldn't really even care too much about that in Clone Wars because it is kind of the nature of the beast with the show. But to have that after having this morally complex discussion, I felt like it didn't land for me. Maybe that's just me being defensive of the Jedi. I wouldn't put it past myself. Maybe that's just going to be addressed next week and the full episode isn't out. Maybe it just is what it is. Clone Wars has always been kind of interesting in how it presents ethical things. But that was just one thing that I kind of noticed. But anyway, Trace is getting out. Ahsoka figures out how to use the Force to bust open the door to their cell. When she does that, she wakes Rafa up and pretends that it was just like a power outage, and then they get away, they're running off. They have a plan to get out of like the gated in prison area out into the main streets, and they do that. And along the way, Ahsoka's doing a lot of that, kind of like using the Force but hoping nobody notices, to get the door open, to knock some crates over, to jump across the bridge, to get Trace across the bridge, to move the guy out where Trace could shoot him. Ahsoka is constantly trying to figure out how to both hide that she's a Jedi while also not letting her friends die when she literally has the power to save them. So that's interesting to watch her navigate, and I think that's just a big part of Ahsoka adapting. I think it's interesting that when they eventually get sold out to the Pikes, they get sold out by the guy that they did not give money to. Granted, they probably really didn't actually have money to give to him, but I kind of wonder, like, would he have still turned them in if he had gotten money, or would he not? Like, and it really easily could have gone either way. He really easily could have been like, oh yeah, well, I'll get more money for turning them in, or he could have been like, and not seen them, but certainly upsetting him didn't help the situation. Ahsoka, Rafa, and Trace are trying to find a way off planet, and Trace spots her ship, and she really wants her ship. Ahsoka is noticing that like maybe Rafa's cut out for this life, but Trace is just too. She's just not a criminal, and not really up for the criminal's life. Trace is all about finding her ship, and not in a selfish, bratty sort of way, but I think it really represents something to Trace, that she put the ship back together, that it is her life, and that she doesn't want her life without her ship in a way, which is something we understand from other Star Wars pilots that we've seen across the stories. But again, you're just kind of seeing the more cynical side of the galaxy versus the more hopeful side of the galaxy represented in these two sisters. Now, possibly the single most exciting part of this episode was Bo-Katan shows up. So Bo-Katan, of course, comes from the Clone Wars. We saw it in the past Mandalorian arcs. We knew Bo-Katan was going to be in the series because she was in the season because she was in the trailer, but we didn't necessarily know she was going to show up in this arc. And she's talking about Ahsoka. She says something about having a common enemy. I'm presuming that's Maul. So I'm really excited because presumably next week, Bo-Katan and friends will be how they actually break out and break away from the Pikes. And that could actually lead directly into the Siege of Mandalore. So instead of having like three separate arcs, the idea of this arc kind of moving into the final arc, I think is really great. Then, the other really neat thing, I kind of felt like I was supposed to know who the person was, the other Mandalorian was who was talking, and then if you look at the credits, it's confirmed. Ursa Wren. So if you don't remember, Ursa Wren is the mother of Sabine Wren, so this is a Rebels character that actually got a speaking part in Clone Wars. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that if we had any kind of Rebel stuff, it was going to be background only. Although I did also say you could easily change background character 57 into somebody, and presumably this was a case where this was going to be background Mandalorian 57 and is now Ursa Wren. But either way, it's really exciting to see her in the episode, and the idea that the Wren family is somebody we could see. Sabine would be very young if born. I don't know how much older Sabine is than Ezra, but Ezra is not born yet. So, we're probably not going to see Sabine flying around tagging anything in her armor. So it would be interesting to see that, and to like see Clan Ren get involved, and how they would be connected to all this. So that was just I got really excited. Like, because I knew Bo-Katan was going to be in the show, but I just didn't realize she was going to be in it so soon. So that was really exciting. But at the end, our three main characters get kidnapped, and they kind of, again, start the episode off, or in the episode where they started. I've seen a couple of people already kind of critique that. I don't mind it. I don't feel like these episodes are supposed to be big, important to the fate of the whole galaxy. This is more like Ahsoka kind of understanding the state of the galaxy. I think maybe you could make some sort of deep metaphorical argument about how life kind of repeats itself over and over again, and maybe that's why they have to keep escaping. But ultimately, I liked the episode because it gave us a pretense for getting to know the Martez sisters' family story and how that impacts Ahsoka. And then really they needed to leave the prison so that Bo-Katan and Ursa, Ren, and whoever the third person is could know that they were there. You know, otherwise it's like, why would they be spying on the prison? Like, it was important because it's going to connect to the Mandalorians, and the Mandalorians are going to be important. So like, that was, if there was like a grand galactic plot point to it, that's really what happened. I can certainly understand why people think this isn't really for them. But ultimately, again, this show, I said this last week, it feels like the evolved version of Clone Wars that I was really hoping we were going to get. That this is the type of episodes we would have gotten all those years ago, but just a little bit more nuanced and tied into stories in a way they wouldn't have been otherwise. But those are my thoughts overall on the episode. I feel like there was a lot more to talk about, but at this point, I'm just really excited to see where the last episode goes and how the arc ends. And see what this means as we get closer to the Siege of Mandalore. But let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments below. If you're not already, please follow us on all the socials. Consider joining our Discord. I'm always excited to get the chance to chat with people. And until next time, keep it real and fly casual.
Cooking candy fun!